Travis, why don't you start by telling me about how your substance use started and how it progressed into addictive use, and kind of what the substances were, the natural progression, etc.
Yes, for me, my substance use was kind of a slow progression at first. I dabbled in a few things in my teenage years. I lived with my dad for most of that time. And then, being a pastor, he had very strict rules. So I would do a lot of these things kind of in secret. And then when I turned 18, moved out of his house, that's when I got to explore a little bit more. And it was all fun and games for the longest time. And then I would have periods where I would explore and then kind of clean up and get right and get the job or something like that. Specifically in 2007, I spent a lot of time losing a whole bunch of weight just to join the Army. And I think it was really when I got to the Army when drinking specifically became a big thing for me. I was stationed in DC. It was the first time I was really off on my own. Again, there were periods before where I'd lived with friends for a few months here and there, and I'd experimented with different things, but now I was on my own, getting a steady paycheck. And again, living in DC, if you knew where to go, there was a party every night. And then not to mention all the barracks parties as well. And for me, it was just that freedom and again, fun and games. And when that all came crashing down, when I got out the Army and didn't have a whole lot going for me, that's when I started wanting to relive and keep that party alive. But the party was over. And at this point, I'm now just drinking and using to numb a lot of those feelings. And that would progress throughout the next few years and specifically into my marriage. I've said in my story before, even towards the end, I was never a everyday kind of a drinker or user, and most of my using was alcohol, marijuana, and a lot of pain pills, opioids. But it would be binges and often droughts in between. But it was always in the back of my mind. And again, even though it wasn't an everyday thing for me, it definitely took a huge toll on my own mental health and the lives of my now ex-wife and my kids as well. As far as internal, and again, this kind of goes back even to before I started dabbling with anything. I'm a notorious escapist. As a kid, I would watch movies, read books, play video games, specifically anything to do with like the fantasy genre, sci-fi, something that I get myself out of my present world and into something else. And then again, after the party was over and I realized that substances could numb a lot of those feelings that I didn't want to feel, that was my outlet. And that's when, again, even though it wasn't a daily thing, it would become progressively worse. And the idea of, okay, well, I know I got a free weekend coming up. I can definitely, I planned this whole event or this whole weekend of just shutting out the world. And that's what it would look like for me. It was quite literally, I would use that often as an excuse to shut out the world, get away from obligations. And a lot of times, that's exactly what it was.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, it would lead to a lot of isolation for you.
Yes, absolutely. Isolation was a big thing for me with my usage. As far as why I joined the military, I had a crazy notion in my younger years. I wanted to be a police officer. And coming from a line of pastors and missionaries, I wanted to do something completely different. And I think in a way, looking back at it now, I think there was a lot of recognizing that there were some not so pleasant things that I'd done. I felt like by becoming a police officer, I could have tipped the scales back in my favor, so to speak. At the time, I had a friend of mine who had just come back from basic training, and he said, well, why don't you join the Army, be an MP? I said, okay. He said, and you can give me a $4,000 recruitment bonus on top of it, and I'll split it with you 50-50. So that's kind of how it started. I didn't instinctually think, army, military police, but I had this idea of wanting to be a police officer, and it sounded like a feasible route to get there. And then, of course, I joined, and it was not what I envisioned it to be. Part of that being stationed in D.C., if you're familiar with that at all, is very political. A lot of ceremonial duties, and again, being that there were a lot of honor guards and a lot of colleges, and I spoke previously about the party scene, and again, it was a party, 24/7, 365, and if you just knew where to go. And even this notion that I had of, wanting to tip the scales back in my favor by doing good, that still didn't help. I got into drinking, and actually the synthetic marijuana that was going around, that was really running rampant about the time that I was in, I got heavily involved with that, all while being military police and uphold, I was living a very much so a double life. As far as my exit from the military, I signed a 5-year contract. I completed just shy of 4. As you can see, I'm a bigger guy, and I also mentioned I lost a lot of weight just to join. So weight has been an issue most of my life. Even while I was in the Army, I struggled with weight. Even when I was at my best, what I consider my best physical condition, I was still overweight by military standards. And throw in a handful of minor injuries and growing problem with drinking, and the weight piled on towards the end of my time. And again, in those years specifically, the military was cutting back, and the honor guard, I didn't fit the appearance. So I was one of the first on the chopping block. Now, fortunately, I did receive an honorable discharge, but did I plan for anything? Did I make it? No, I continued on the party journey. I tried to make it last as long as I could, not really thinking about my future, and to my own detriment in the end. I think it may have, but I didn't really realize that connection at the time. Again, it was party, and where I wanted to keep that going, but that's when it shifted into that idea of numbing out pain, getting away from obligations, and the why I drank and used at that point had shifted into something completely different. But I definitely felt the urge, the cravings, I developed these patterns, and I knew that it felt good while I was doing it before, so it's got to feel good if I continued living that lifestyle, right? So specifically when I got out the military, I can tell you the first 10 months, I was either homeless or living in my car, or rooming with a couple of my friends who were living off post, who were still in the military, and I would do that live with them for a few weeks at a time until they kicked me to the curb. And I was going to school while I was doing that, just to kind of make ends meet, try to do something different. But again, I was, as much as I wanted to start the next chapter of my life, and specifically I chose massage therapy because I thought it was the furthest thing away from military that I could get. And then I think about halfway through, I heard someone give out some random stat about massage therapists are like some of the highest percentage of drug users out there. It was bizarre to me at the time, but at the time it was like, well, hey, it's another shot to try all these different things. And I will say, I didn't drink and use as often as I even would have liked to at the time, trying different things out, or just numbing that everything, because quite frankly, I didn't have the money. There were some not so pleasant things that I did in order to get a little extra money, and it's a whole different topic for.
So, what was the state of your life when you started thinking about asking for help, and then what was kind of the catalyst? What was the thing that pushed you to like seek help?
As far as seeking help, I can say that I don't think there was a specific moment when I reached out. I had gone to the inpatient psych ward of the VA at least 6 or 7 times within an 8-year span, from shortly after my now ex-wife and I were married until the time that eventually led me to treatment. Never, never went to any kind of treatment beforehand. Never even entertained the idea. Maybe one time I did consider it, but I backed out at the last minute because I didn't have a way to get down there. Um, and I can tell you, growing up with my parents being pastors, and the church specifically that they worked in, they had adult rehabilitation centers, and I was around a lot of, um, the alcoholics and drug addicts, and what I saw was the guys that were, living under bridges, hopping from place to place, and even at my worst, I thought to myself, well, that's not me. I'm not there. Well, if I would have gone on any longer, I definitely would have been very much so. But again, this last time I went to the psych ward in Alexandria, I had nothing left. By this point, my wife and kids had left me almost a year before, or maybe even maybe a little more than a year before. Um, I had no communication with them. All I had was the house and the car. Well, the car at this point is inoperable, which in turn, I couldn't get to work, and I lived 22 miles out in the country. My closest neighbor was a good 3/4 of a mile down the road. So even if they were willing to give me a ride, I mean, I'll have to. It was a great opportunity for me to make excuses. So I let everything kind of fall apart, and the house was quite literally crumbling around me. I was juggling between, keeping the lights and the water on one month and paying the mortgage the next, and with a little bit of income I had from the VA, and I was just in that downward spiral until one day I realized that I can't keep doing this anymore, and I tried to take my own life, um, with the use of copious amounts of alcohol and opioids. And then when I woke up the next day, I just now I've come to the point where I've tried to take my own life and I can't even do that right. And that's when I did reach out to my neighbor, and they said, we're going to get you some help. I said, I don't know what to do. And they took me to the hospital, where I used to work, which was very awkward. And then from there went to the VA, and that's again, the idea of treatment came. And at this point I had nothing else left. I was willing to give it a shot. And that's ultimately where my journey began. As far as when I got to treatment, again, at this point I had nothing, and I knew I couldn't continue on the way I was. And there's a saying, and that we often use in recovery, is that your life wasn't working for you before, so maybe you should try something different. I think I kind of come to that conclusion on my own. And I do remember specifically, in treatment, get thrown the book, and we're reading those, and then there's the idea that again, I had spoken on, I was seeing the differences in me and other alcoholics and addicts, and I thought, no, that's not me at all. I don't drink every day. I don't use every day. And then when I was hit with the literature, I realized, that is me. I mean, and it literally covers. There was a section in there that covered me, and so I realized that, again, if it wasn't working for me before, I'm gonna give this a shot. If there's even the slightest chance of a way out and a better way, I'll take it, because nothing has worked for me before. I've done therapy and done medication, and it all just kind of seemed like it wasn't working. But that all that also was a lot of my part because I didn't put any extra effort into it. If that makes sense. As far as what I needed from the program was, the clear defined, this is the way to do it kind of thing. And I feel like I was given that, and especially, through various 12-step programs, this is this is how others had done it, and this is, kind of a clear set of instructions, but also like that as a suggestion, not a rule. And that, like, yeah, I can have it if I want it. And it was, for me, it was that idea of how much do I want this? And I can definitely tell you that the longer and longer I was in treatment and further into recovery and starting to branch out and meet other people and seeing their lives change for the better, that's when I fully committed to it. There was even a short time at the beginning where I was a little hesitant. And I think at one point, I made this pretty clear. At one point, before even getting to NORA, I had the idea that I was going to do my 60 days of treatment and bounce out to Costa Rica, retire and live out the rest of my life. And then of course the idea of the NORA House was presented to me, and again, the initial thought was, okay, cool, another 6 months, rack up a little more money. I got still, but there something changed. As far as my experience at the NORA House, I can tell you that it was by far the best decision I made in this recovery journey. It was kind of the catalyst for everything. Again, I'd done the 60 days at another place, and then I was given the opportunity to go, and just because the way it's structured, and that it's still like a lot of treatment, but I had a little more freedoms, and being able to get my own vehicle and go to my own meetings and make the connections that I have really helped me. But NORA specifically, it was and still is chock full of great people that are also in recovery and are doing this and are really good examples of how we work, these programs, these 12-step programs. And I had a lot of great role models early on, and even when I questioned or even tried to defy certain ideas or principles, I had people again that were doing this thing, that were in this fight already, and just a great learning environment, and a great stepping stone, for me specifically, realizing. And again, I think I mentioned, there was even that flip. And I think for me, it was specifically when I was able to get my truck, start going to my own meetings. I loved the camaraderie in the house, but there's some things in my personal life where I felt, even with as much as I tried to connect with the other guys, there were still some things that I had to reach out and get a little bit different community, and that was very big for me. And that I was able to have both of that, the camaraderie with the other veterans, but also some more meetings and fellowship with other people that kind of spoke to a different part of my life. Some people have helped me along with that. I feel like I'm getting better, but that's still something I'm working on. But I have a lot of people in my life that are very quick to point that out, and a lot of them are friends of mine that I went to NORA with as well. So, and that are still associated with Longbranch in some way, shape, or form. So it's even though I'm over a year removed from being a resident of the house, it still has a very big impact on my life. Today, I can tell you my life is vastly different from when I set foot into the first treatment center. Within the last month, went to court up in Alexandria, and I've been awarded, at least for now, weekly chats with my kids. I get video chats with them every week, and we'll be reassessing in April and seeing how things are going. And that's something that I'm very excited about. You know, all these other things, and the job, being on service boards and sponsorship and all these other things, as important as they are, chasing after a degree in theater, as important as they are, and as much praise as I'm getting for all these things, my relationship with my kids is something that I've really been working on since the beginning, and to finally see that coming through it's huge. One of the things I've been kind of alluding to in some of the previous questions is I was able to come out. Growing up in a house of pastors, and then in the military, I'm bisexual. That was something that I grappled with for a long time, and through treatment and meeting different groups in recovery, I was able to be comfortable with myself. I'm going back to school. I'm 38 years old, and for the first time ever, I'm back in a college campus setting. There's a saying that says, we'll love you until you learn how to love yourself. And I remember that was one of the last things my ex-wife said to me was, there's no way you can love me and the kids because you don't know how to love yourself. And that stuck with me and stung for a long time. But that's something that I can honestly say that I have today. I do love myself, and that is probably that is the greatest gift that I've gotten out of recovery. And I get to continue doing that and sharing that with the world. And as far as what my life is like today, it's immeasurably better than what it was. What I would say to somebody who needs help, doesn't know how to ask for it, because I've been there. I know what it's like to have nothing, to literally try to become nothing and fail at that. It's something that's hard to grapple with. Talk about it. Even if you don't know how to ask for help, don't be afraid to talk about what's bothering you. Because somebody will listen, and somebody might just have the right suggestion. And when that suggestion comes, especially if it pertains to getting help, regardless of any preconceived notions about treatment or addiction or alcoholism or any of these things, be open. Again, one of the things I said is there's often this idea that, well, my way wasn't working for me. Start there. If someone can take an honest look at their life and say the way things have been going is not working, maybe consider something different.